I love Mara at the top.
Oh, sweet. Okay, we're allowed. It really does feel like we're about to take a family photo.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's the worst.
I was talking to them earlier about me doing like the hot dad thing.
I was like, people see this.
This is
It's
perfect.
okay. No, it definitely works out. Oh, so okay. So right now we got 30 people in, and oh wow.
Waiting
So-
for them to come.
Awesome.
But we are here.
Yes,
We're very
we are
much
here.
here.
We're queer, and we're going to tell you about how our education is a broken system, bleeding you dry of your hard-earned money.
Okay, all right. Relax. We don't need to go that hard. Save it for the other hour. All right. Do you want to kick us off, Mara?
Yeah, I thought maybe we were waiting for like people to trickle in for a few minutes.
It is 10 o'clock.
We kind of just sent out the link, though.
I did say 5 minutes.
All right. All
This
right.
is Art School Dropout.
Yeah, we don't want to
Yes.
bore those
Mm-hmm.
30
The good
people
people
who are waiting. Yeah. Okay.
Poor
So
people.
all right. Well, they can watch the beginning. Anyways, hi everybody.
Yo.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you very much for joining us. This is the Art School Dropout live stream post C2E2 day 1.
Mm-hmm.
So first things first, I want everybody to introduce themselves. What's your name? What do you do? And why don't we start with Isadora and we'll work our way
Okay,
down.
thank you for helping me in the middle part of the question. Well, I'm Isadora, and I'm a freelance illustrator. I'm from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, and I do a lot of flowers. No, I just like to draw cute things and colorful things, and that's mostly what I do.
Mm-hmm.
I'm good with that description. So
We're good with it too.
thank you.
Okay, I'm Gabriel Picolo. I just released Icarus in the Sun. I'm very famous for the Teen Titans fan art, which I love to do. I'm also an illustrator based in Brazil, and that's it.
That's it.
That's it.
Just that. My name is Sara Alfageeh. I'm an illustrator and creative director. I'm best known for redrawing some bad X-Men designs and for Girls with Swords. And I'm also publishing a new graphic novel coming fall 2021 with HarperCollins called Squire.
Great. And I'm Liz Kramer, and I got my first job as a comic colorist, and I also do webcomics, and that's how I got it.
What's the name of your webcomic?
My webcomic is named Threader. It's currently undergoing a reboot right now, but I do hope to return to it.
And my name is Mara Jayne Carpenter. I am a illustrator, writer, and comics colorist. I recently just released my first book, Eldritch Animals, which is all about like Lovecraftian horror and animal conservation. All right, so thank you everybody for joining us again. I see we've got a lot more people in the chat now. This is very exciting.
I can't even read it from here. Excited to see us. Hi, hello. So
Smiley
sweet.
faces.
Okay, cool. We're good.
All right. So Sara and I have been talking about doing this panel for a while now. We've just had a lot of frustration talking to artists who are just getting started, and they seem to be sold this idea that there is one right way to learn how to do art and then one right way to break into the industry and become a professional. And we know that through our own life experiences and through talking to our colleagues that that's simply not true. There's 100 different ways and everything works for, different people. So we wanted to impart that knowledge onto you guys so that you don't have to feel frustrated when you don't think you can achieve that one right way. So I wanted to start off by talking about age, the ages we were when we first got started with art and the ages we were when we decided we were a professional, when we felt like a professional. So Isadora, why don't you start?
Oh boy, I wish you went with the other order because now no, it's okay. Well, the age, I think it's the same in the United States, but the age we're supposed to know like everything about their future, that's around 17. Mm-hmm. So back then I had absolutely no idea. And to be honest, I'm happy that I didn't, because I made a lot of like weird choices, and I didn't have the maturity I needed for when I finally realized that what I wanted to do with my life was art, which was around 21, I think.
Mhm.
Was in my second college, because first I did biomedicine and then I did design. And while I was in design, it's when I learned that it was a profession. So when I decided, I had so much more experience, and by default, because I had more experience, I had more stuff to tell in my creative work. So for me, it was a blessing to be at that age starting to do like social media stuff. Actually, social media was like 19, 20, but I'm so happy I had that age, because maybe if I was younger, I would have made like worse decisions, or I wouldn't know how to handle I wouldn't say stardom, but I wouldn't know how to handle the kind of emotional baggage that you get from the internet, and the kind of emotional baggage that you get from having your art having critiques all the time. So I'm happy I was older.
Being in the public eye.
Yeah, for me, I can't say it was bad, but I'm 25 now, and I went like really professional like 2 years ago, so I'm 23, and then again I needed that mental fortitude to be a freelancer. So for me, age was like, as I was older, I was like, yeah, it's good that I got to this point at this age, and not previously, because it just stayed good for me, honestly.
So for me, it was like in high school, I was doing some pretty bad manga that I was just copying. I was pretty much copying just because I was started getting into manga and comics, and I thought all that was just so cool. I wanted to do something like that. Like Isadora said, I was too young. I didn't have any story to tell, so I was pretty much just copying stuff. But I think that was my first, my entrance to my gateway to comics, in a way. So I had to panel to do panels, to do speech bubbles, to do like layouts. Even though I wasn't aware of all these terms, I was drawing them. Fast forward to 2015. That's when I started working as an illustrator. For me, the moment I decided to work as an illustrator was when I had like. I had enough money in savings from my other job, so I felt comfortable in like quitting my old job and starting to do stuff as a freelance illustrator. Then I started to work as a comic artist later on. It was after I started publishing Icarus in the Sun online, which wasn't even a web comic. You can say you can say it's a webcomic. It was not meant to be one. It was like more meant to be like a collection of drawings that had a story, a sense of storyline tying them together, but it wasn't exactly a webcomic. But it drew attention of editors, publishers, and that's what got me into the comics industry specifically.
I didn't actually start drawing until I was 17. I was on Tumblr and I was noticing that everybody who was producing all this fantastic fan art around me was my age and younger. So I was like, oh, so this is accessible to me. If they can figure it out, why can't I figure it out? Yeah. So then I would grab like printer paper at my school library and Google anime eyes and copy that. And,
just the eyes.
Yeah, just the eyes. And then I was like, oh no, I have to figure out the rest of it too. But that's what got me into it. And I had absolutely no intention to do it as like a career. I didn't know what that looked like. I knew there were artists. It's just, it wasn't something that clicked in my head. And then I had
someone pays them like
it's not even, I didn't even reach that point. And then I had a high school art teacher. I had finally taken my first ever art class in my senior year of high school. And my art teacher came over and she's like, you're going to make a portfolio. I was like, sure. Whatever. Whatever you say, sorry, bud. And I kept ignoring her, and she was after me for like a full-on month and a half, and she introduced me to a nearby college's program called it was like art therapy program. She's like, fine, don't do art, but do something with art. And I was like, all right, whatever. So I went to school originally for psychology. And so the way that it worked, it was like a psychology for 4 years, and then you did your master's in art. So it was very, very separate.
Uh-huh.
And for my first semester, I go in as a psych major, find out I hate this so much. I hate it so much. And the one class I was taking for fun was a drawing class.
Uh-huh.
And I realized all of my time, all of my energy was going into this one drawing class. And something very... almost, I would straight up say like life-changing happened to me, where I got Ms. Marvel Volume 1 in my hands in my freshman year of college, and I burned through it, and I was like, oh, so I guess stories about people I can identify with and who identify with me can exist, and it's a super popular comic, and it's like, okay, maybe there's something here for me. And so I kicked down my advisor's door, and I was like, I'm switching, and then I told my parents. So I decided that I wanted to actually do this. So I think I was 19 at the time. Started drawing at 17. Decided I wanted to go pro at 19. Wouldn't call myself a pro until this year. I would, yeah,
Really?
I'd probably say this year is like, especially this convention, where, you know, I have my book deal announced. I'm putting myself forward as like with freelance.
You
and
pretty much
Star
have a
Wars.
brand right now.
Yeah, it's like I know what I'm doing, even if, but I'm always learning. So it's like I call myself a pro.
Goal.
Yeah, so I can call myself a pro. I hold myself as a professional now.
I started to call myself a pro the moment I started to get actual money to pay.
That's true. But this is also my first. So I graduated last year. So this is my first year full-time freelance. So it's still kind of the same
Okay.
thing.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
Makes sense.
All right, so I guess okay. Sorry, I will project more. So I started drawing ever since I was little. I actually became an artist because of a dead lizard. I was so upset
Dead
about.
lizard?
What?
Yes.
What?
I was like, I'm gonna draw this little lizard to
I'm
create
so
a memorial
happy
for
with the
it.
last one. This is the most exciting
Oh,
story.
I can hear that. Yeah.
I'm
Keep going.
obsessed to go.
Keep going.
But that was like, it was 4 or 5, and it was like, I'm going to be drawing for the rest of my life. So, but my formative years were in high school, like 13 years old. It was like anime and manga, everything. And I felt a little weird about it. I'm like, you know what? It's what I like. And I kept continuing to draw it. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to be an artist. I went through the AP art program into art school. Then freshman year in art school, I wanted to be the first female artist on Batman because my friend got me into that. But then I found out Becky Cloonan was the first female artist. I was like, oh no, my dreams are crushed. But then I graduated art school and I felt kind of aimless. So I also had a minor in design, and then I kind of like fell into that because it's easier to find a job. And I think it's 2 or 3 years after I graduated, Mara invited me to be a flatter for a comic, and I'm like, is this what comics are now? Is this how it? And I was also looking into web comics then, and then I started to like make my own web comic in my free time, and actually got my first colorist deal out of that.
Wow.
So
Wow.
yeah.
Question. Do you would you still color Batman, or it's like
Are you done with that goal?
Yeah. Would you still do it like real talk?
Would you color for Batman?
Would I color for Batman? Yeah, I love Batman. Oh my god!
Just wondering,
If I wasn't
just
scared of
wondering.
needles, I'd probably get a Batman
Bruce,
on my shoulder.
Batman, if you're watching.
I feel like, hey, Mara's
Yeah.
got a fantastic set of questions, but now that we're talking about this stuff, like, I really want to ask this. What was a very specific goal you had when you very first started that now you think is ridiculous? That now you think is ridiculous.
When I was just copying stuff,
Mhm.
by the time I wasn't aware that I was copying stuff, I was for me I was creating manga and stuff, but everything everything was just so looked way too much to existing characters, existing stories. So, and at that moment I was 16, maybe 15 or 16. And I really, really wanted to be published by Shonen Jump. Totally weird.
You can still do it.
Totally weird. I was like, I just have to like pack my stuff and suggest ship to them. They don't understand that. Like, do I know Japanese? No.
Oh, it's not that it's ridiculous right now, but it's just so hard. Not even, but Harry Potter covers. That was like my dream of dreams.
Mhm.
And now it's like, it could happen like 6 years in the future. They don't release new covers so often. But
right.
yeah, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do something Harry Potter.
It's
So
not that far-fetched though. Like,
Thank you.
when I was in my first year of college, my very first, one of my first jobs was in the art and design library at my university. So it was my job, honestly, to just do whatever the hell I wanted at the front desk and just like recommend comics to people.
Okay.
And so we had these collection of illustration annuals. Like every year they come out with a new award for the Society of Illustrators and 3x3 in American illustration. And in my head, if you got in those books, you were the coolest person ever. Like you made it.
The hottest going.
Yeah, I'm like, you get in those books and that's it, you've made it. Of course, this is a very skewed perspective and those annuals don't work like that. And I ended up knowing more people who got in those books and I was like, oh, you're not impressive. Here's the thing.
Taste.
This fall, I did get into society as an art director, and I got to go to the event and see everything, and it was fantastic. But then I realized that was the moment where I'm like, oh, my ambitions have changed. Like I don't need validation from this specific thing. It's not back to our like topic at hand. It wasn't the right way only.
Right.
Like there's so many other ways to perceive success.
Right.
But in my head,
That's so
you got
cool.
into Society of Illustrator, you were successful. Yeah.
What about you, Liz?
Well, she was the one who kicked us off.
Well, yeah, I wanted to be the first female artist in Batman because no one's ever
What
done
about you,
it.
Mara?
But then-
I really wanted to be an anime on Toonami.
You're
okay,
worse.
yeah. Well, okay. Here's
Here's
how and when I started drawing was I saw Dragon Ball Z on Toonami when I was like 7, and we had a VHS hooked up to the TV. So I would pop in an empty VHS and I would record the episodes, and then I would go back, watch them, pause it on a scene I liked, and then I would draw it.
Oh my goodness.
And that's
Trigon.
originally how I learned to draw, and I would make like crappy little rip-off Inuyasha comics.
Yes.
Oh my
Yes.
god,
so good.
Mine, I do like Bleach ripoff, so
Bleach.
fine.
Bleach for me and Death Note.
I
I
did a lot
Trace
of
Death
Fruits
Note.
Basket and Karakana, like those
Yeah.
hyper shoujo. So
Yes.
I think this
Yeah.
translates to
So
my work today.
everybody did it. You learn by copying others. But then when I got older, I had my first manic episode when I was 14 because I have bipolar disorder, and I stopped drawing for several years. After that, everybody told me that I should go into graphic design because it's like, oh, you like art, and that's how you make money at art.
People
is
treat
Yeah.
graphic design like art light.
Oh,
Right.
that's the
Yeah.
same in
Yeah.
Brazil. The same.
because
Yeah.
it's
It's
you
the
know
real art job.
it's it's commercial, and so I
You
just
get
sort
to
of
have a desk job and still
Yeah.
be a creative. So
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
like I can get a desk at home now. I'm good.
so I just sort of did that. I was sort of just floating through life because I was still like undiagnosed bipolar, and I just did it because everybody told me that's what you're supposed to be doing. And I didn't really get started figuring out who I was and what I wanted to do with my art career until I was maybe aged 20, 21, 22. I was at the tail end of my college career. I had finally gotten diagnosed and got proper medication, and having myself separated from my illness, I could finally see what I wanted to be and not what it wanted me to be.
Yes.
And then so I got my first comics job when I was 23, completely by accident. But I didn't really consider myself a professional until maybe when I was 25, which was only last year when I worked on like my 3rd series, and I was like, all right, I'm in now.
I should clarify though, because you took, I'll go into details about this later, but it's like you gave me my first like pro job. I did flatting for your comics, and in my eyes at that time, as a sophomore in college, you were the most pro out there. So it's all about perspective.
That's true. That's true. So let's move on to our next question now. So again, with the art education, I wanted everybody to discuss like how much education each one of us has, and where did we go to school, and why did we make those decisions?
Can I be last?
No worries.
Pressure's up. How about this?
Let's
Anyone
do
who
it.
wants
Me
to start off can
Yeah.
go.
About my art education and why I went there?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, when I was applying to all the schools, my heart was set on, I think it was Ringling or no, it was on Micah, but they didn't give me a very nice scholarship there.
For our friends outside the U.S. who might not know MICA, what does that stand for?
Maryland Institute of College of Art.
Yes.
Yes.
Mhm.
But I ended up going to the Hartford Art School because they gave me a sizable scholarship there for my portfolio and good grades, which don't stock in school. So, and I majored in illustration there, minored in design. Though part of me kind of wanted to double major, but the system wouldn't let me. And I actually wrote a column about it in the newspaper, in our little school newspaper. And apparently the provost of the school picked it up, and they noticed it. And they're like, "Oh, maybe we should switch up the program a little bit," because there was a lot of classes that didn't have a lot of students, and they weren't happy with it. We had a foundation program that was very regimented. I'm like, I could have skipped a couple of these classes. I'm like, I'm a little more advanced than some people.
You managed to prompt them to actually change up the program.
I think so. I haven't checked back.
Nice.
That's cool.
But the illustration department and graphic design department were the ones bringing the money. It was a very traditional fine art school. I didn't get to do what I wanted to do until like junior, senior year. I'm like, why do I have to wait this long? It was agony. But yeah, it was very traditional in that you paint from still lifes all the time, and you learn different mediums of like oil paints, watercolors,
So
acrylic
very
ink.
technical skills.
Yes, it was a
Yeah.
very technically skilled school, and all I wanted to do was like, learn how to make a scene from scratch and get better at my anatomy. And we didn't even have a comic art program.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a pretty tiny school, so.
Mara, can you remind me what the question was again?
The
full question.
Okay, how much education do you have? Like in terms of your degree, where did you go, and why did you make those decisions?
So, as I mentioned before, I went into school for psychology, and I quit after 20 minutes. And I went straight into illustration. And the type of school that I went into was, they were very into contemporary illustration. And very like abstracted illustration. They blurred the lines between like illustration and fine arts, which was not what I was into at all. I wanted to make art like the people I saw online. I wanted to be making work that was primarily digital, first of all. And there was like one single digital class that barely taught me anything. So in terms of being a digital artist specifically, I very much consider myself self-taught. Yeah. And I had a lot of frustration with my illustration program. They weren't teaching me the technical skills that I wanted. They weren't teaching me the anatomy skills that I wanted. But then I realized I became friends with a lot of my professors. And so even though I was less happy with the actual college, it was the individual connections that I had with my professors, who were like my personal mentors, really, really helped me thrive and like stopped me from dropping out full time, actually, and stopped me from transferring. And so there's two main art schools in Boston, and I actually transferred to the other one to see if, the grass was greener. And I found out they had also a lot of problems with their program. And it made me realize, I'm like, art school is really what you make of it. And there's going to be problems. There's no such thing as a perfect art school. So, but what actually helped me a lot was that by being dissatisfied with my program, I learned how to ask questions. I learned how to get help. And I was very, very self-motivated. And I wouldn't have been that way if I was happy with the education I got.
Oh, yeah.
I wouldn't have seen
Yes.
the gaps in my education. Yeah.
For me, I'm pretty much self-taught regarding art and digital art. My education, I went to when I finished high school, I started international relationships college, which has nothing to do with what I did today. Which is like it wasn't like a total random decision. I would still like to study all that stuff, but I want to like to make that career out of that. So I decided to quit like 2 years after I started the course. And then I started working as a receptionist at the hostel, and I had a lot of free time, and then I took that free time and improved my drawings until it was like I started posting them online, of course. And at some point, people were offering me money to draw for them, and that's
You're
how I
like,
started.
word?
Yeah,
You're like,
what?
nice!
I like
Yeah.
eating.
Exactly.
Right?
I have to say that that's like the number one thing you actually need to just draw. It's like you just need time
Time, you just
Yeah.
need
Time,
time. Yeah,
definitely.
and willingness.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it's complicated because educational system.
Scooch in. We want to see you in frame.
Oh, yeah.
Scooch in.
I'm
Get
good. I'm
those.
good. Well,
Mhm.
educational system in Brazil, it's a lot different. So I don't know if we all of us have the time for me to explain, but basically what you need to know is that I went to a public university, but public universities in Brazil are usually considered the best ones. I say usually because our government, well, let's not get into that.
Yeah,
but
another day.
I went to 2
We'll post some
different
articles.
yeah. Well, no one's got time for talking about Brazil's government, but the thing is, during high school, I was set on going to a public university, and I went for biomedicine because I like to draw, and I was like, drawing cells is so fun. I must like biology.
That's awesome.
So that was kind of
Small
it.
tangent. I know quite a few like Harvard medical students, top of the top, whose notes are all sketches. It's a very common tool
Yeah.
for med students. Yeah.
And it is really good. It's really a good way to like learn because I was really good at biology and chemistry, which are things you can draw, and I was terrible at
You're
physics.
the smartest of us.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, you had options.
I went to the funny thing is I didn't actually hate it. I had a good time there, but like 2 years in, like that was biomedicine was 4 years, the graduation, and 2 years in, I was just so bored. Actually, I mean, it was fun. I had a job in a lab, but I was really bored, and I had a couple friends who I met on Harry Potter like forum. I had a couple friends that they studied at. They did the art school there, but it was like fine art, so it never appealed to me. But I went to some of their classes, and eventually I wasn't seeing any of my classes anymore. And my college, my university went on strike, and I had like a couple months, and I was like, oh, I don't like this at all, and I like their classes best, so I'm gonna study for design school, which is the next best thing, you know. Nobody lives from art. There's no artist here who does it in Brazil because I didn't know better. There are, but at the time I didn't know better. And then I went in design school, and that was like a year studying because it's like SATs to get into public universities. And the one I wanted to get in was like 20 spots. So it was a lot of time studying. And those
comes back to time. You just need time. Yeah.
So as I spent like this 1 year, I spent like afternoons and nights like studying for the exams. But in mornings, I would like try to blow some steam off drawing. So it was something that I used a lot as a scapegoat for all the tension because it was really competitive. And when I got in, I got to meet so many people who were really creative. And at design school, I didn't know what my teachers were trying to teach me. But at the end of a year, like my critical thinking about like art and in general was so much better, and I still don't know how they did it because in all classes I was like, this is like my design school was based on Bauhaus, the German school. So it was very like creative, but really sort of rough around
the edges.
and really really cold. I hate that that's the word I can come with when I think about German, but
It's very
regimented.
regimented.
That's
yes.
that's something
Straightforward.
that I would say like I got the most helpful thing I got in my art education, whether they intended or not. I learned how to ask questions, and I learned how to study and how to ask the right questions.
How to have structure, because
Yes.
the thing is, what I learned and what I've been learning is that sort of the decoration and the creative part and the flowy part, I can do that. But the structure, that is so important to learn.
How do you define structure?
Structure is like composition,
Yes.
good design, and color theory.
Mhm.
So those are things that
Foundations.
foundations.
Yeah.
Nobody gave me a book, and they just showed me by examples of homework that was entirely too depressing and boring, but I did it anyway.
Yeah.
But like 2 years in, I started to get paid to do stuff, and I just didn't feel like the art school had nothing else to like teach me. And because I was older, because if I had been like 18 or 19, I'd probably be like, oh no, I have to finish it. But I was 21 at the time, and it really hit me how little I needed the
Yes.
course when I got the invitation from Faber-Castell to go to their castle in Germany for how do we say it? Piccolo was there too. Actually, that's where we
What are you trying to say?
really became friends. The sort of event they did.
Oh yeah, they
Program.
yeah, program. Yeah,
Yeah,
they basically
sort
invited
of.
us to meet the
So-
main
So
headquarters.
That
I-
was on the date I had a test in college.
and you had
And I
to
was
make
like-
that choice.
And I was like,
Yeah.
go to a
Yeah.
castle in Germany
Yeah.
or have a test,
Yes.
you know?
We didn't have any
And
more.
I
For a
had
degree that I'm not
that
going to use.
exact same. It's really fascinating. I had the exact same experience, and for me in particular, because that's when I started getting like proper freelance work. I started having like a proper social media audience and things like that.
Uh-huh.
I had instructors coming up to me and being like, "Why are you still here? Like, leave, get out." And that actually made my senior year incredibly difficult and depressing, because I knew I had to graduate.
Mhm.
I knew that I had to follow through with the program, but at that point, it wasn't of any benefit to me. It was just for so that they can give me a fancy receipt.
Mhm.
At the
Yes.
end. So they can
Yes.
say, congratulations, you did.
Congratulations.
But that
Yeah.
was the thing, you know, eventually I started to do it more for my parents than I was
It
doing
was
for myself.
100% for my parents,
And-
yes.
It was really, my mental health was like in
Yeah.
a really low level, because
Uh-huh.
at the time I decided to drop out. I had an internship at an animation company, and I was doing animation.
You
to
were
the
working,
animation.
you were doing the thing you went to
Mhm.
school for.
Yeah.
Yeah, so and I had like all the things they said, like in order to get a job, I had a
You
job.
had it,
Yeah.
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 The exact same feeling.
Then
Exact same
eventually
feeling.
I was like, this just doesn't work for me anymore.
If it was up
And-
to me, if I could create an art school, like with the, few different art school experiences, it's like you get to leave the moment you feel ready to.
Right.
Because honestly, that's what matters. There's some people, they stay stuck in student mentality years and years after art school.
Mhm.
And they never actually create work because they have a confidence issue.
Uh-huh.
And then it's like,
They're waiting
feel-
for
they're waiting
yes.
for someone to
Mhm.
give
To
them another
give-
grade.
to
Yes.
assign
Yes.
it. Give me an
Give me an
assignment.
assignment.
Yeah.
And it's like you realize in your head that it's like if you think of yourself as a student, you stay a student.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's a mental block a lot of people can't see.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
What I think though was like a really big pro of going to college was that like I am middle class in Brazil, and I
Mhm.
studied in a private high school, and all my friends lived close by. All my friends had like a very similar sort of income, and I didn't know anyone that was different, like
You were in a
slightly
bubble.
different. So
Mhm.
yes, I was in a bubble. And since I went to a public college like 2 times, I got to meet so many different people.
Yes.
So I learned how to interact with people. I learned like about queerness, which was really
Yes.
fun,
Same
because
here.
maybe I wouldn't have like
Mhm.
I mean, I would still be bisexual, but I
Okay.
wouldn't figure it out as soon because I felt welcome in college about those questions and about learning about diversity and also about learning to work in groups, which is something that I worry about people who never had to.
And so much of illustration, and I'm sure especially with us who work in comics, it's so much about about working in teams,
Mhm.
and
Yes.
you know, your job is the reason someone else also gets paid. It's like if you don't meet your deadline, you're actually screwing over so many different types of people.
The
whole
whole
lot-
you
chain,
clog
like-
up the pipeline.
Yeah,
The whole
your
pipeline, yeah.
your editor can't pass something in. You're holding up the letter. You're holding up all these different moving parts in a machine. So you have to be an incredibly responsible team player, and you know you have to be easy to work with. And if you can be the most talented person on earth, but if you're a jackass who can't meet a deadline,
Yeah.
no one's gonna talk
No
to
one-
And
you.
if you can't
Yeah.
communicate effectively and clearly, that is so important because, like, working as a colorist, like, I need to know when those inks are going to be done because I have to budget my time.
Uh-huh.
If I'm working on 2 different projects at once, I need to know, are those inks going to be ready for me when I get out of my day job and I can get this page done right now?
Uh-huh.
Or should I start doing that other project because you're not going to have those ready for me until tomorrow? And you can be the most amazing artist in the world, but if you can't communicate with me effectively, I really don't want to work with you because this production process is going to be so much stress.
Stressful, yeah.
Yeah.
So stressful. The project isn't going to be as good as I know it could be, and it's probably going to run
And
late.
so much pressure to
Mhm.
And so much pressure, and then publishers get upset with you about it, and it looks bad on not just the person who didn't communicate, not just you, but everybody who was on that team.
As someone who had the experience to be a creative director, and I do a lot of hiring for various creative projects, that was the number one thing I kept an eye out for, even interacting with people on social media. It's like, don't be, there's this weird obsession with being like dismissive and rude on social media to like anyone who isn't a mutual with you or whatever. It's like you automatically interpret interactions as hostile, and I have to keep an eye out for that. I'm like, will I want to interact with you one-on-one through email? It's like, will you be easy to work with and honestly just nice? Will you be nice to work with?
Yes.
And it's those
Like
little things where it's like the way you present yourself on social media very easily translates over to people who will be checking you out for work, especially as an illustrator. Yeah.
And what about you?
Oh,
Your art education.
yeah. Okay. Yeah. So mine was a little bit different. When I was little, I grew up in Rhode Island, and I really
Which is not an island.
No, it's not an island. I taught them tonight it's not an island, but I grew up in Rhode Island, and I so desperately wanted to go to RISD, which is the Rhode Island School of Design, which is a very widely
The
renowned,
Harvard of illustration.
it really is very widely renowned school, and I lived in a very small town, so it was a very limited amount of knowledge, but I knew there was RISD, and I had dreams. But I came from a very poor family, and so one day my sister told me, I was probably only 10, when she told me, Mara, you're never going to be able to go to that school. Only trust fund babies go to that school, and you're not that.
It's expensive to be an art student.
It's very, very expensive.
Can we talk about how accessible digital art is too? Not to derail, but it's like digital art is what opens the doors for so many broke kids.
It really does
Yeah.
for those who can't afford all of the materials.
Well, it's
Even-
not. I know this is a really big issue, but I actually didn't even say it. We don't have art schools like that in Brazil.
Oh yeah.
I don't
The
think
very
you guys.
concept.
I don't know if you guys know that, but we just don't.
The very concept of art
It's
schools.
either
Yeah.
fine arts, super specific fine arts, you're gonna be a painter, or
Very, very
you're gonna
traditional
be a
stuff.
museum. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
We just don't have. Just don't.
It's either that or you don't have.
Yeah.
So that
Right.
made my decision
As you're
easier,
saying,
but
Mom.
sorry to interrupt.
No, it's totally good. That's a big component of why I made the decisions that I did make was, when I turned 18 and graduated high school and everybody started telling me to go to college for graphic design because, it was safe, it was commercial, it was what you could make money at. And that's what my family was concerned about, was making that livable wage. And so not only did I go more into commercial, but because we didn't have very much money, I decided to go to a community college. So
Yes.
kind of like your public colleges, except in America, they're most of the time regarded as less than
Mhm.
a university, even
Okay.
though
It's considered like not even like a plan B. It's like considered, oh, you couldn't get into those colleges. That's why you're
you
here.
weren't good
Mhm.
enough, you weren't smart
That's
enough.
interesting because in Brazil it's kind of the opposite,
Yeah.
but not
Yes.
really. It
Mhm.
depends, but it's kind of the opposite.
Mhm.
You don't manage to get in public universities because that's where the money is for research. So
Mhm.
that's where the best
Mhm.
teachers are, in the
Mhm.
public colleges.
Right.
I mean, not anymore. It's shifting, but
yeah.
Yeah.
it's very different
Um,
dynamics.
But yeah, so I went there because it was the most affordable option, and even then, with it being the most affordable option, I worked all throughout the time I was there. I was a part-time student, and I worked as a nursing assistant at a nursing home for 6 years while I got my associate's degree. So it took me 5 years to get a 2-year degree.
Mhm.
But the one thing that college did offer me, because it was a community college and because it was so focused on, people are here to get a wage, to get a degree that will provide them with
Mhm.
a job and security. A lot of people that attended that school were, single mothers who were
Mhm.
going back to
Mhm.
school because they wanted a better life for themselves and their kids. They knew who was attending that school, so they were very passionate about making sure we had something on the other side of that degree. And so when you're at the tail end of your program, they get you an internship somewhere.
Mhm.
So where I did get lucky was I did that internship. I got a job at a small multimedia firm as a graphic designer. And I got that right out of college through that internship. I got an award for that internship, which was the only academic award I've ever gotten in my entire life. It was bonkers.
I have to say that promise, that follow through, was not something I got in my art school degree.
Right.
My school, I can say with full confidence, sorry if you're watching this, because they asked me to talk at Accepted Students Day. They were not preparing me to have work after college. Any job opportunity, any freelance opportunity I got was almost entirely 100% through my own personal connections I was making or through my social media presence. It was not through my school, didn't help me get a job, didn't help me get an internship, barely helped me make a website. It's just like the fact that your 2-year community college degree, they followed through on that and got you an internship that, it turned into a real job.
Right.
That
was
volumes
that
of
was
how much they care
pivotal,
about.
and it was
students.
because we were all working class people, and that's the reason we're here. If I can't get a job through this, what am I even doing? I might as well be full time at the nursing home, because otherwise I'm just wasting my time and thousands of dollars.
And now I'm stuck with student loan degrees.
Right, exactly. That is also another thing, is I graduated college without debt. Because I paid out of pocket, and I went to a school that made it easy for me to pay out of pocket. But what I should also say is that my degree has absolutely nothing to do with what I do now as an artist. I did that graphic design job. I worked there for 2 years and hated it because office politics are the worst. And I hate commercial design with a passion. But
we do end up doing shit. We have to do something. Find out you hate it.
Yeah,
I know you hate it so much, and that becomes your fire to do anything.
Yes,
I will
that is
say,
so true.
I am glad that I have that experience, though, because learning how to operate in an office does prepare you for the administrative side of comics, which is all about learning to work in a team, learning to manage a team if you're somebody like us, and like how to mediate a group chat or like an email chain, and
how we spend literally half our time sending emails, not drawing.
Most of the job is not making art, you guys.
Yeah, at all. Like, that's the unglamorous side. It's like you want to just get paid to draw, but then it's like all the bullshit, the business side of it, and the negotiating. And even when you have an agent and someone to like help you out on them, it's still so much of it.
But another thing how that office job helped me with getting into comics was so I got into comics completely by accident. My friend Jude Vagance brought me to New York Comic Con one year, introduced me to a person. I said I was vaguely interested in like doing coloring work because I was like, I can't really draw that well, but I really like to color. And gave them my business card, and they emailed me a couple months later and said, hey, can you do some test pages for us? And I did not know how to color comics at all, but I knew this was it. This was my shot. And so I actually found an online course that I paid, I think, like $100 or $200 for from Michael K. Russell, who's a professional comics colorist.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I did all of his lessons through there, and that's how I learned to color. And I burned through those lessons in like 1 or 2 days, and did the test pages as I was learning how to color and shipped them back. But here's one of the very important things of how that office experience helped me. I found out later from one of the people on my creative team, told me that the job was between you and one other person. And the difference between you, what got you the job, it wasn't necessarily your technical skill. It was the fact that while we were emailing you, you were amiable, you were willing to take feedback and work with us on stuff, and you were very nice when we told you, certain things weren't working for us and asked you to change it. You were really willing to work with us. And this other person wasn't okay with that. They were very insistent that what they did was the best thing, and they didn't want to compromise with us as much. And having to work in an office under creative supervisors and stuff like that, like, you don't have a choice. You either make the changes that they want and the client wants, or you can leave.
How many times has a client made you make a revision that you thought made the piece look uglier?
Oh, that hurts so much.
How many times you're like, are you sure though? But it's like, that idea's worse. Have you considered your idea's worse?
And I would you rather be right or be left?
I have to
That's the thing. It's like, do you want to get paid and be done with it?
Yeah. And I have to like very diplomatically explain to them why I feel like this is what's working. Like,
That's a good word.
Yes.
Very
Yes,
You have
absolutely.
to trick them into thinking it's their idea.
That's why you had a psychologist.
Maybe I was a psychologist.
My graphic design professors actually taught me that, like, how to mediate that situation. And to like never show the client the thing you hate the most. Never show them the ugliest thumbnail.
They will always pick the idea you hate the most.
They
It's the law.
Absolutely.
It's the rule. You present them 4 ideas in the sketches, and you're like, oh, let me just toss in this one. They'll pick the ugly one that you didn't plan and that you didn't want to do.
I usually do 4 thumbnails, then I take the one I hate most out. And I present
See,
that's very
I
smart.
should do that.
Okay, all right. Let's
I'm gonna write that note down for myself.
let's continue because so I guess let's cut to the end of the education portion of this and just say, like, what do you think somebody who's looking into getting an art education should consider when they're looking at schools or they're looking at, like Skillshare or an online class or anything like that? What should they be thinking about? What are the important things?
Can I start with this one?
Yeah, go for it.
So, as most of my art education is being self-taught, just try to understand what you're weak at or what you don't like about your own stuff, and hit that weakness. Like, try to get exactly that piece of knowledge. Don't try to like, oh, okay, I have to learn anatomy, but anatomy is just too broad. Like, what do you exactly do you want to get better at? So, okay, I want to draw like muscly arms because I want to draw superheroes. So go for that specifically. Hit that. Okay, then master that, and then move to the next thing. So
Be super specific.
Be super specific, as specific as you can.
Yes.
So let's say you're gonna look for a Skillshare tutorial, for a Imaginism tutorial. Try to look for something that's specific and it's like exactly the stuff that you're weak at.
Yeah.
It may sound obvious, but it's not. It took me a while to figure that out.
No, you're
But
right.
you think it's obvious, and
Yeah.
then but you still have to have the day where you're like, oh, that's what
Yeah,
it was.
yeah.
I think
Because
it works
there's a lot-
differently
and there's a lot of-
for each one, but
And how many times have
That's
you heard that
interesting.
advice from people and it didn't make sense to
Yeah,
you
yeah.
because like you had to figure it out for yourself.
And there's a lot of free resources online. So
Mhm,
you don't. Sometimes you don't have. You have to pay
Yeah.
to find the.
But I think, and that's my perspective. I needed the basics. I needed
Yes.
the basics from a teacher,
Yeah.
and that's not
Yeah.
saying that you can get from a teacher like online. But I needed like the illustration 101.
Mhm.
That's what I needed.
Ah, you can get movies
And-
online.
Yes,
but you don't
I
know,
know,
where
but
to look. You don't know
you're,
how to
you're
ask
talking
those
about like
questions.
specific
yeah,
stuff.
yeah, true.
And I think
true, true,
specific stuff is for the people who have the basics,
Mhm.
and there's some people who don't.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
what I would
I
say,
definitely didn't. I was part of that.
what I would say is like first, be kind to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Have patience. Don't expect things to happen like suddenly on 1 year.
How'd
or
you find
2
your art
years.
style?
How do you find your
How'd you
art
find your
style?
art
So that's
style?
it.
How'd you find your art
That's
style?
where I wanted to
How do
get
I get my art
because
style? How?
wait a second. It's gonna happen. Well, anyway, I just think your art style is, well, let's get deep here. Your art style is like, it's you. And how do you expect to know your art style if you don't know yourself?
The way that
And
I
there's a lot of
once-
people that just don't because they haven't lived through experiences yet. And the experiences are like just drawing. Drawing is the experience. So you're going to have to draw like a lot. And if
Draw
you
what you
can
like.
do it with someone like giving you classes on like either Skillshare or other places, so we can just drop names. I don't know.
Patreon.
Patreon,
YouTube,
and YouTube, and
art tutorials.
Yeah.
It's up from
Art
2005.
tutorials.
Yeah.
yes, those were really good.
Yeah.
And like
That they still have
pausing
Patreon.
on anime.
I touched a nerve. Sorry, keep going.
Keep going.
Wherever you need to go, like to get your shit together. No, to like develop your artwork, just do it with patience, and just I don't know.
My art style now.
And I don't know. I think if you really need to know yourself to know with which method works best. Because I needed someone to be there with me for the basics. But after the basics, I was like, no, I want to do it myself. I don't need anyone else. And I just went for specifics. Like, makes sense, basics, specifics, but yeah, that's it.
The way that I once described art style was it's the stuff that you like, the stuff that you consume. So it's like entertainment, media, film, life experiences, all that stuff, and then your own special brand of laziness. So
Yes. I love that.
ultimately, you're
That is
just
so good.
gonna end up doing the stuff that you enjoy doing, and when you decide to quit is gonna determine how that looks like. I refuse to render. So it's just not gonna fucking happen. And that's what defines my art style. I go for big graphic shapes, and then I go into my details with my liner because my liner is fun. And that is how I ended up with my art style. I love the color yellow and blue, and I like girls with swords. Done. So you have
Before
to
that-
find out what you hate.
What you
Yes.
did?
Yeah.
What do you hate?
Before
Dig
that, I
down.
used to describe as like your art style is like a mix between your best like features, the things you do best, and your most terrible mistakes.
Exactly.
So that's exactly what you said.
Yeah.
Like makes a lot of sense. But you have to know what you do best.
Mhm.
And you have to know what you can't possibly do. And like start to go to mediocre in that and then just keep going like and do flex on your good stuff.
Yeah, fix it.
Liz, what about you?
I learned starting out mostly from books. Books were my go-to in DeviantArt tutorials.
We can't hate on them. They taught us.
They taught us
Yeah.
so
True to our
much.
foundations,
Like,
man.
Even before I got to like my high school art classes, I was like living out of the book, like studying the anatomy and just learning the figure really well. And that's how I got my foundations. I mean, go to the library, get a book. That's where I found my my more advanced art book to learn. I think it was Brune Hogarth.
He's great.
Yeah.
He's great. He's had.
Can we say the title out loud for the folks who might want to pick it up later?
Oh yeah, please.
Yes.
So-
I also got involved in. Sorry.
No,
Brune
it's okay.
Hogarth, Dynamic Anatomy, I believe
Yes.
it was. Yes.
This same guy has I don't know if it's the same book, but he has a book about heads.
Mhm.
It's basically
Andrew Loomis.
Andrew Loomis.
a book.
okay.
Loomis
does
has
have
one,
head too,
but
yes. Brune Hogarth.
he has Hogarth has a book specifically about heads,
Mhm.
which was the book that made me understand how to like draw heads.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
like this guy is really good. But Andrew Loomis is another one that's really great.
Yeah.
And you can find his stuff online for free.
Oh yeah. I think what kind of kickstarted me, I mean, there's this one girl I really admire in senior year, but also I found conceptart.org and like the sketchbook threads through there. I'm like, wow, look at all these just ideas spilling out
You know
on
that
a
website
page.
doesn't exist anymore?
It doesn't exist anymore.
It
Yeah.
doesn't?
We saw that website, that beautiful
Oh my
resource of a
God.
website. Ty, but a good alternative to that, I feel like a lot of the information translates over, is Muddy Colors at Blogspot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chris Lovely runs that, I believe.
Mhm.
But yeah, I just took a lot of inspiration from that, and it inspired me to be inspired with the world around me, even just like mundane stuff you'd never like consider. It's like, I know how to render that now, like the shape and the form, and like just like how the light falls on it. It was
Yeah.
just like an aha moment, like
I love it.
yeah. So,
And there's
I
things that click into place. I think the common thread that I'm seeing is like learning how to pay attention, and how to ask questions,
Observation
and how to
exercise.
study.
Yeah.
You
No, but
have
also,
to
you
love
know-
studying things.
Yes.
There's something like super dumb that you can totally do if you need structure. You can just go like art school curriculum.
Mhm.
What are the
Yeah,
classes?
yeah.
yeah.
And then just
Person-
search for it. Like the first class is like, I don't know, stick figures.
Yeah,
Mm.
Draw 100 circles.
that's actually a solid one.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
It is.
I'm like, I'm not gonna shit on that
Do
one.
you guys know Control Paint? It's a website that
I
teaches.
think so. Yes.
It's a website that teaches you how to
Oh,
do
yeah.
digital art,
Mhm.
but they have a modules.
Modules.
That's a word.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, good. So they have modules, and before they teach you how to do digital art, they teach you how to draw, like traditional.
Ah.
But that's
Yeah.
what.
And there's a
It's
video
important,
for
yeah.
each one. There's a video like it's like 5-minute videos for each thing, and it's like, oh, it's so huge. Like that's my to-go thing whenever people ask me like anything about drawing. I'm like, Control Paint has really good like video tutorials, and they're really easy to understand and so good.
For me, I need a structured learning setting. I had to go to art school because I needed to be around people. I needed to have those conversations. You need to talk to other artists.
Mhm.
Yes.
If artists who
that's so
are
important.
informed
Very.
to look at your work and know what you're doing too, and give you critical feedback, and give you straight up critique. Because like if you don't talk to other artists, you aren't gonna. It just helps your vocabulary, helps you
Yeah.
learn how to
Yep,
talk
yep,
about
yep.
it, how to give feedback, and how to
Critiques.
and then interact with other people who are in like your creative profession. So you wanted to say something?
Yeah, well, I was gonna expand upon that in terms of like you said that you need structure.
That's how I
And
learn.
one of the things that I think that people need to take into account when they're looking into art education is how do you work
yes.
personally? Because I have ADHD, and that changes dramatically how I absorb information, the rate at which I can absorb information. And so sometimes a 3-hour studio class isn't going to cut it for me because there's a cap
Mhm.
here
Mhm.
on how much I can process within a set period of time.
Mhm.
And so sometimes having the online course where I can do a little bit and then take a break and come back whenever I want, or do the whole thing and then come back at it again in a couple hours or the
Mhm.
next day, makes a huge difference
Yes.
in terms of being able to absorb the
Never
content
thought of that
in
that way.
in a
Wow,
meaningful
makes
way,
sense.
because it's not just copying it down. It's copying it down and then like understand what is it doing. Like, why am I making this line? Not
Yeah.
just make the line. But yeah, that's very important to understand. Otherwise, you could end up spending a lot of money and actually not learning very much, despite even your best efforts. It's not even that you didn't try. It's just maybe this wasn't the right
Best
program
method.
for you.
Oversaturated sometimes
work
with
for you.
information.
Yeah, absolutely. And that makes a lot of people, especially people with attention disorders and stuff like that, feel like failures because we don't learn in the traditional way. And it's not that we're bad at the thing. It's not that I can't draw. It's that a 3-hour studio course wasn't designed for me.
If you have this very clear expectation of like, this is what it means to succeed, and you fall short of that, and it's incredibly devastating and discouraging. It's like, why aren't I getting hired for comics? Why isn't my webcomic getting more readers? Why aren't I getting more followers on Twitter? If that's your expectation and definition of success and you don't reach it, you might not pick up a pencil to draw again. And that's the unfortunate truth of like, you get told that this is the only way to do it. When in reality, you realize like, oh, this isn't working. So, okay, let me backtrack and try something else. Let me try something else. And once you get in that mentality of like, there's always another option, you'll start seeing opportunities everywhere. And that's the most exciting thing. You have to be as creative with your business kind of sense and the way that you represent yourself as a brand as you are with your artwork.
That is true.
Yeah. So why don't we move on from education, because we've been talking about that for quite some time now, which was awesome. But let's talk about what happens after you graduate, when you start stepping into that.
I wouldn't know.
That's right.
Or not. So after you graduate,
Okay,
or after
okay.
you basically, let's say, quit being a student.
Yeah.
Yes,
When you
after
quit being
being
a
a
student, what happens after that? At what point did you guys really consider yourself a professional? Like what flipped that switch for you? That this is it. This is my job now.
When I quit my animation internship, so when I was full-time freelance, I was like, yep, I made that decision, like knowingly made that decision. And when I dropped out, actually, because it was a big decision. It was like dropping out of college and having to have a good set of reasons why I did it. Because when I did it, I didn't have it. But when I had to tell my parents, then I had to have it, and I had
you
a
have
lot
to
of
report back to
yeah. Hello, mothership. So that is my
mothership. That's so good.
Thank you. I am funny in English as well.
There you go.
But the thing is, when I had to make like really big decisions, I was like, there's no going back. So this is
There
it.
was a risk.
I am a pro now. I'm gonna call myself a pro to help with the self-esteem on that part. But yeah, I think that was it, pretty much.
I guess I know. Okay,
Sure.
I guess, well, I'm not a full-time professional. I consider myself a part-time professional. I still have my full-time job as a page designer, graphic designer, whatever you want to call it. I think I considered myself a pro when I got my first colorist deal. My name's on the cover, so
That is amazing.
it's my first gig. So, but I'm the baby, but everyone's got to start somewhere, you know.
So first time that we called ourselves pros.
Yeah, when you
Yeah.
really felt it.
So-
you know?
For me, it was like probably halfway through my senior year when I was like starting. Star Wars had called me up to do a book for them, and I was getting regular freelance work, and I started seeing my savings account going up, and I was like, nice. And then I realized, I'm like, oh, word, I'm just doing it. I'm not waiting for anyone to give me permission to do it. I just went out and I presented myself that way, and I started to treat myself the way clients and editors and agents and stuff were talking to me. I was like, well, because for a long time I would do this thing where I'm like, they don't need to know that I'm just pretending. Like I would act as a confident person to trick them. But then I realized, I'm like, oh no, I guess I'm a confident person now. Yeah. So you just trick yourself into having
Uh-huh.
self-esteem.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
exactly it. You have some,
Like,
for
you'll
most
believe
of my
yourself.
career, someone had to tell me something for me to believe.
Yeah.
And when I quit my job, I already had an agent.
Yeah.
It's like I have someone working for me,
Yeah.
and I'm not a worker myself.
Yeah.
So yeah.
How do you not?
And it's
How do you
almost
not
like
know?
even
No.
though they work for you, you're like, oh, so I need to be worth working for.
Yes.
That's a big part of it. And I remember when my agent reached out to me for the first time halfway through my senior year, I'm like, oh, I can't mess this up. Like there's expectations on me now. But that gave me like a renewed sense of motivation.
Yes.
And I'm still I had to at that time get the motivation from somebody else, but then I realized what it meant to create that motivation for myself.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that's ultimately the long-lasting thing, because if you're constantly seeking validation elsewhere, I mean, we're all artists, that's why we share things to Twitter. And sometimes sometimes you send an illustration and you're like refreshing your email a couple times, you're like, tell me it's good, tell me I did a good job.
And your second
Yeah.
refresh loop.
Mhm.
I worked as a professional artist, like in an office, and I still didn't even call myself a professional. Like, I would absolutely not have gone to conventions and called myself a pro, even though I was a lead graphic designer in an office setting, because that wasn't what it meant to be a pro to me. That was just an office job. That's just what I did to make the salary and get by. Professionals were people who had books and were doing
Published.
That was your
Yeah.
definition of success.
who were
Yes.
published and had, and they had books at their tables and they had signings and they were doing all of these things. That was a pro to me. And so even after my first like official colorist gig where my name was on the cover, it still didn't feel real. It felt like, like I was pretending. It felt like, oh, this is just something that happened by accident that I just like did on the side because I was still working at the office at the time. I didn't really feel like I was a professional until probably my third published series where I was like, well, clearly this is a trend.
There's a pattern here.
There's a pattern.
My name keeps showing up on
These
covers.
things keep happening to me. So it's funny how I think of them as like happening to me, not something that like I actively did.
I think you touch on a really, really important point, that imposter syndrome
Yes.
doesn't go away
Yes.
unless you stop it.
Uh-huh.
And like there are some creators that we know personally and look up to and love, and then we notice how they're going through the same imposter syndrome as well. And we're like, you can't think you're an imposter because I love you. Because I love you.
Also that.
And it's especially when you go to conventions and stuff, and it's like you
get
can
to
have
talk
you get to talk with people, show up at your table, and they're like, I know you through Twitter and I study your work and you're influencing me. And then I realize I'm like, I was you 2 years ago, saying that to my favorite artist.
Well,
Yes.
also, you remember, you mentioned earlier when we were talking, at one point, I was the most pro person you knew because I had given both you and Liz your first professional jobs and being my flatters. And so you both at the time were like, Mara's a professional.
Yep.
She's in the industry. She's doing published work.
She knows what she's doing.
She's showing me around to editors. She took me to my first
introducing me to
Comic-Con
people. She's paying me, and like even though I had technically staff, that didn't feel right to me to say that I was a professional yet, because I didn't have my own book on the table. I was still under so many other tiers of people. I felt like you had to reach a certain.
There's always someone who's gonna be.
There's always.
And that's in my personal opinion. This is where like I love to be the shittiest artist in the room. Do you know what I mean? I love to know that there's all these people I can learn from. I don't see them as competition. I'm like, you're cooler than me, and so I'm cool by association. So I'm like, cool. And it's like the worst is the worst version of it. But it's like, it's so, you can't be discouraged by someone else's. It's a healthy way of thinking. It's like you can't be discouraged by other people's success. You have to be happy with them, because that's how you learn to really be happy for yourself. And if you see other peers and illustrators and stuff as only competition, you will not thrive. because it's your community
Yes.
that gives you the opportunities, gives you the gig, recommends you, drops your name in an email, slips
Or
you
even like moral support. Like,
yeah, even
like,
more
Yeah.
support.
Also, in a base level, if you can only be happy for yourself, there's only so
It's
much
very
happiness
sad.
you can
Yeah.
feel.
Yeah,
You know,
it's very
that's a
sad.
happiness
Mhm.
multiplier, like having friends who are.
Mhm. And it's
Awesome.
like, and then their joy is your joy, and you're like, I did nothing, and I'm thrilled.
That is the best. Oh,
Yeah,
fun
I'm
and
like,
no work.
oh, I'm gonna. This is my high too. Yeah. You suffered. I'm having fun.
That was his Indiegogo campaign.
Yeah,
It was like
Yeah.
so
that's-
at the beginning.
that's
and I was
what
like,
I'm
yeah!
like, seeing your numbers go up. I'm like, we did it. I did nothing, but we did it.
I'm rich, wait, I'm not, but he is.
And mentioning that actually ties into something else that I really wanted to bring up was like who gets to decide when you're a professional? You know, because
Your client.
Yeah.
The person who's
The
I was
one
gonna
who's
say
paying,
no
the one
one,
who's paying.
but
No, the
okay.
person who decided you were worth investing
Right.
in.
Yes.
Yeah.
So at some level, it's okay to get the external validation, but it's like after that point, like for example, how do you take compliments? It's like when someone says, "I love your work," what do? Do you pretend to say a joke and be like, "Oh no, thank you"? Or a lot of things that I see with young artists is that you'll compliment their work and they're like, "Oh, I did it so fast and I was gonna change all this stuff." I'm like, "Shut up." Take the compliment.
Yeah.
And I had to
Yeah.
learn that too. I had to learn that the hard way.
Yeah.
Someone told me to my face, "Shut up, take the compliment." And I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, okay, got it."
Yeah.
Word noted.
yeah, one of the key things that I tell young artists now is don't point out the flaws to me. Don't point out the things that you don't like about your art, because those might be the things that endear me to your art.
Yeah.
I might
Uh-huh.
think that was intentional, and I really dig that shaky
No one
line
knows,
art.
yeah, no one
No.
knows like your
And
intentions behind it. Like,
Yeah, that's what I love about illustration, and it's kind of a burden, but it's also a relief. It's like
Uh-huh.
there are no excuses. The art's gonna exist without you being there, and people are gonna interact with your work
ooh, that's so
without
powerful.
you being there.
Ooh, that's so powerful. I love that. I love that.
Keep stroking my ego. But it's like you can't leave a little note at the bottom, and this was actually something one of my teachers had
Yeah, what
told me.
is like,
And you can't write at the bottom, "Oh, I only did this in 6 hours and I wanted to change this,
Uh-huh,
this, and this." And your client definitely doesn't want to hear that shit. They're like, you gave your best effort, and even if you didn't, you have to pretend like you did. And so it's like when knowing that the art will exist out on your own, it doesn't scare me. It lifts responsibility off my shoulders.
Because there's nothing you
It's
can
like,
do about it now.
that's it. It's done. You throw it
It's
out there.
It's out
And
there.
you let
Yeah,
go and you
yeah.
don't
Mhm.
look at it. And that's why it's kind of cool to. And Comic-Con's one of the very few places where I see all my work next to each other. Because, like, you don't really see that digitally. Maybe on Instagram or something. But, like, but you see it all in front of you in person. Like, the stuff you worked on for the past year.
Uh-huh.
You're like, oh, one, I really like the color green. But, oh.
But
I
you know what I usually say on the table? That it's a lot of like posting online and like having
Mhm.
following, and it's like money on The Sims. You know,
No,
it's there, but you know, it's not
I've never
exactly
played The
real.
Sims.
You never played The Sims?
Me neither. I know
It's
all
okay.
that.
It's an American game.
I know how it's played.
You know, but you
I
know
just
that
haven't
there's
played it.
money on The Sims. It can be like super rich, but it's a game. So
Yes.
it feels
Right.
like that on the social media game.
Yeah, a lot
Where
of people.
when you see your art like in real life, it's like,
Mhm.
oh, it does exist. When you see people,
Mhm.
actual like fans, come to your table, like, you're
the
not a
numbers are
number.
real.
Yeah,
You're a
yeah.
number. Thank you, number.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. But a lot of people don't realize that. It's like, I think, in my personal opinion, the first 3,000 follows is fun. And then after that point, numbers mean nothing to me. Like, it doesn't make sense in my head.
Yeah,
My
yeah.
head can't wrap around.
Oh, they become
that these are all
milestones.
It can't
people.
fit
They
over
become-
3,000 people in a room. Like you can't
Yeah.
comprehend that
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
crowd.
So that's the very odd thing. It's like you just have to people who are obsessed over the numbers, they're gonna just obsess over it. They're not gonna have fun anymore. They're not gonna talk to people normally. If you don't think someone with like 30 followers is worth responding to,
Ooh, that's shitty.
you have to get
Oh.
over yourself.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
have to get over yourself real fast.
Uh-huh.
It's such an ugly mentality.
Yeah, at one point we did have a discussion about the social media sickness of
Mhm.
like how an artist with, thousands of followers is somehow worth more than an artist with
Yes.
a couple of hundred, even though our skill levels could be almost
and that
almost
like
the same, or
Uh-huh.
even though our work is different, it could be just as valuable
Just
to
as
someone.
valuable, yeah, yeah.
and
that's
also
true.
another thing is people think that the numbers translates to success. The most like regularly hired illustrators I know have like 300 Instagram followers and have like it's because guess what, they made the impression in front of the people who matter,
No matter,
which
uh-huh.
are the clients and the editors and the artists. They know how to deliver good work on time, respectfully, and all that. And that's what it looks like. There are some other people where yes, of course, they get their social media followings for their success. You know, they have the Patreons and the Twitch and the YouTube
There are ways
channels.
of monetizing.
Yeah, you can
followers.
monetize
Yeah,
it, but it doesn't translate to success.
Well,
and it doesn't translate to likability either.
That is true.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I feel like you have like, let's say you have it here, your social media like presence, and you have it here with the quality of your art style. Those two things are gonna get you hired.
Even quality of art style, I would argue, different art styles function for different reasons. The work that gets you a million Twitch. I don't know how Twitch works. Okay. I was like, I'm gonna get in trouble. The thing that gets you, you know, 500,000 views on YouTube, the kind of art you make for a YouTube channel is very different from the kind of art you're gonna make for, you know, Imagine FX magazine or for an editorial or the New York Times.
But what I'm saying like, it was like not independent of style, the quality of your artwork, how much you studied, how much it shows, and then the number of your social media. You know that those two and a lot more things like being a congenial person and all of that, but those two can get you hired. But trying to figure out the correlation between the two is going to get you crazy.
Yeah.
It's driving me crazy.
Yes, it's true. You're going to go nuts. You're going to go nuts.
It's not easy. And it's...
And you have to step away from it. You have to reassess your value as a...
Because you usually look at the exceptions. The people who worked hard for a long time and got the audience because of it.
Yeah, and sometimes it happens like
but this is the exception. How many people with that kind of following exist in our community?
It's also, but that it goes back to the perception of success.
Yes.
If getting the 2 million Instagram followers is your perception of success, I highly suggest you look elsewhere.
Because it was not his.
And not just that, it's the idea of like anything below that is failure.
Yes.
And also, it's just algorithms. It's just a numbers game. You know what style works best for those things.
There's one other thing. Your followers on social media, they're not exactly yours because you're always you have to comply with the rules of the social media.
Yes.
Let's say Instagram or Twitter. So
let's say it's knowing the rules.
Exactly. So let's say
play the game.
Instagram changes. Let's say Instagram changes their weird algorithm tomorrow. And then
you have to figure it out.
my 2 million followers can't see my posts. Like, so what are they worth?
What happened to Tumblr?
Yeah. Oh, that's the other thing. It's like your worth can't be in those sites because the site, you can't control those sites.
Yes.
And that's why people freak out when things change.
So it's above so it's above everything else, a platform. You have to understand it that way.
Yeah. Our former agent did like a super good video. It's on Portuguese on YouTube. And that's what he said. They're not your followers. They're the platform followers. And if you see them that way, you're ready for anything.
I think a good question is, what are you worth if all of your followers disappeared one day?
Yes.
Or if your platform, if your account got deleted one day.
Yeah.
If you no longer had access to your Twitter, your Instagram, your Tumblr, your DeviantArt, your ArtStation, all that stuff one day, what do you have left?
Would you still be hired, you know?
It's like, but I'm saying it's like, do you have connections? Do you have a community?
Yes.
Do you have friends? Do you have people in your corner? What happens to you? Because if you don't have any of those things, but you have 100,000, you know, Twitch followers or something. Again, I don't know.
Again with the Twitch.
Why do I keep saying Twitch? Anyways, you have, you know, 100,000 Instagram followers. Did it mean anything? Did it mean anything at the end of the day?
And here's the thing: it doesn't, because I'm here.
Yes.
When I got my first comics job, I didn't even have an Instagram. I got my first comics job because I'm a nice person and I went for it. And my
you
work
also made that impression in person.
Yes, I did. I went for it, and I was a people person, and I just like put myself out there, and I was receptive when people gave me feedback, and I worked hard. And none of the jobs I've ever gotten have been because somebody saw me on Instagram or on Twitter. I only have a couple hundred followers. been on a number of series and I have my own book now, and none of that came from Twitter or Instagram, and none of it happened because anybody sent me a DM.
Mm-hmm.
My jobs came from somebody emailing me because they were like, hey, I saw that you worked with this other writer, and when I asked them for colorists, they dropped your name. They said you're a great person to work with, and so I wanted to get your information on some stuff. That's how it happened. It was because I made friends, and it was because I was a good person who did good work, and just, worked hard and tried.
Yeah,
It
because
comes
treating
down
it
to
like
also-
mandatory is just so hard. So
I think ultimately
difficult.
the question, I guess, is what is your goal?
What
What is your goal
Yeah,
for your social media
exactly.
platform? Is it to get work? Is it to make friends? Is it to have people like praise your art and share you in comments? It's a perfectly valid reason.
Mhm.
What is the end goal here? For me, I got on Twitter primarily originally to promo my Kickstarter campaign, and what I got out of it instead was mentors and friends and a community, and that stuff. Obviously, I'm
It's not
still
just
posting
making
work to continue to get clients and stuff, but ultimately the joy I'm getting out of it is by interacting with peers and followers and
Big
and-
thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's why I like Twitter
and,
so
and that's
much.
why I
specifically.
stayed, because I could have conversations.
Yeah.
I hate
it's
Instagram for
so
that reason.
interesting when people when you get to answer people and they're like, oh my god, you answered. You're like,
Yeah.
what do
I'm
you
like,
think
you're
I'm doing?
another
I don't want to
person.
talk alone.
Yeah.
You know, that's kind of weird. That doesn't make me like.
Yeah. Or people
If I ask stuff and don't answer, I'm like,
and for me, that's what really pushes me away from Instagram, because I'm a big extrovert person. I want to talk. I want to interact and all that. And I feel like I'm window shopping people's lives on Instagram. There's no communication. There's no back and forth. I'm just looking in one direction, and they can't see me as an audience member, and that's just not a relationship I'm interested in, especially as someone who wants a community. Yeah.
I think, since I have a webcomic, the social media presence is important to me because I don't know many people in comics yet. But the visibility for webcomics relies very heavily online. So you have to, send out an update and, make friends within your webcomic community. Find people who have similar interests and comment on their comic if you generally like it. Like, don't just fake it. And make friends online, even if you may not see
Friends,
someone.
not networking connections and all that. If you go in with that mentality, people smell it from a mile away.
Yeah.
Yeah, like be genuine about it. I mean, I think I read webcomics for like a year and a half before I started my own, just to learn how to get a following for webcomic. If you want to make a living at it, or just go part-time at some point, just to see the structure, how to possibly make it livable. But gaining that community following can be important. It's also getting friends to support you online. But yeah, the webcomic community is really sweet, and
Super
it's like a little happy family.
So it is getting pretty late.
Do we
This
want to
has
do
been-
questions?
I was thinking about that. Do we want to take a couple right before it's almost 11:30
All right.
now.
If you got questions,
You better
drop it in the comments now, or forever hold your peace, or tweet it at us. I don't really give a shit.
You can always just talk to us afterwards too.
I'm
we're
looking
here.
through comments now, so it seems like people have had their own really lovely discussion in between each other, and it's really cool to see each other supporting each other in the comments. That's what we're all about.
Can you read that later?
Yeah, of course, it's gonna be all on YouTube. It's
Okay,
saved
okay,
on
I'm
okay.
gonna read all of
and
your
you're gonna be
comments.
able to see. All right, how to drop out of graphics design. Okay, I know I appreciate working alongside other artists and taking tips from professors, but hold on, slow down. I'm not really sure if this is a good idea. If I can sort of do all of this online as well. If you're going in with that mentality of you work well alongside artists and taking tips from professors, it sounds like you're similar to me in the sense that you need a structured learning setting. You need that communication and social aspect to learning. And I think you can do one of two things. You either head into traditional art school and pray that the people there don't suck, or you just find a local community if that's accessible to you. Sometimes it just genuinely isn't, as unfortunate as it is. And something that me and Mara do actually when we have tight deadlines and things like that is we just throw Google Hangouts together. So, we'll be states apart from each other, but we still have that semblance of us hanging out together. It's not as sad as it sounds. How do you start out marketing yourself?
Oh, geez, that
Oh,
is a
boy.
very complicated question. I think the first thing
Let's
you
do
need to do.
2-sentence answers. Get to the point.
Okay.
So that we can cut to it.
Yeah, just I guess I would say just decide what you want to be, and then
Just know yourself really well.
Yeah.
know
knowing
yourself.
yourself makes
And
everything
play to
very
your
Yes,
easier.
absolutely.
Play to your
And
strengths.
the best way to figure out yourself is to ask other people to explain yourself to you.
Yeah.
Go to a bunch of very different friends. This is how I write all of my artist bios whenever I do like events and stuff. And it's like, how would you explain me as an artist? And then they'll tell me, and I was like, I
That's
don't
it.
like that. I'm gonna write something different. Okay. Anyone want to add their 2 sentences quickly? How would you brand yourself?
But if again, is play your strengths and just know yourself really well. Know what you like to do. Don't market yourself for something you don't want to be.
Yes.
Yes,
that is-
absolutely.
Mhm.
Only include the pieces in your portfolio of things you enjoyed making and things you like.
Want
You like to
time.
be
in the future.
Yeah,
associated.
you want to make in the
Yeah.
future.
This is actually because I look at a lot of portfolios and I actually did a couple portfolio reviews today. One of them for an 11-year-old, which is super cute.
Nice.
But only put pieces in your portfolio and market yourself for stuff you actually want to do. If you have work in your portfolio and you're like, oh, but I actually hate doing environment design. So why am I looking at it? So drop it.
Yeah.
It's not an archive. It's your best work that you want to specifically be hired for.
I mean,
Okay.
I just released a book that was all about endangered animals, and when I'm getting commissions for at the table, it's for animals because they know I like them and they know I'm good at them.
Advice on getting better with digital art: YouTube.
Control paint.
Control. So that is CTRL paint. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. How do you deal with depression and art blocks? Therapy. Art blocks. Do literally anything else besides art.
Go for a walk.
Take a break.
Consume media.
Consume media that
stuff.
consume media that one you're not used to, like
Yes,
stuff that
that's
you
good.
don't actually know how to do. I feel like if you look at other art, you'll try to dissect it and you'll get in your head.
Oh no, that's bad. No.
Yeah.
Well, I mean like movies and
Movies, films.
Find another hobby
Music,
besides
yeah.
art.
Fun.
Songs.
Something different.
Remember what inspires you, like on the first place, and
Yeah.
try to go back to
And
that
find new inspirations.
and find new ones.
Okay. How do you balance improving art and working for clients? This is a good question.
Well,
How
tell
do
me.
you
Improving your art and working with clients at the same
This
time.
is tough. This is tough.
This
This
is
is
the
something.
endless
something-
question.
I would say
This is something I'm still trying to figure
Well,
out.
if you're lucky enough to have to work with stuff you actually like, which is what we all should, like working with your clients should improve your art.
Yeah, you do
Yeah.
get better
Yes.
in the process.
I
You
would
do
say
get better in the process.
take jobs that actively challenge
Yes.
you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Take
I-
jobs that
That's
make
good.
you do something where you're like, crap, I have no idea how to
That's
draw
awesome.
foxes.
That's awesome.
I need to do a bunch of fox gestures for this. And then by the time you're done with that commission or whatever,
You learn
like
something.
you are dope at
Mhm.
drawing
I don't
foxes.
do personal commissions now because one, I'm lucky enough that I have enough freelance work I can turn them down. I don't take any personal commissions unless I feel like I can turn it into a portfolio piece that I can be proud of.
Yeah,
Because
that's
ultimately I'm producing work that I want more of. And so when I'm always purposely challenging myself when I do client work. So I will make my client work more complicated than it should be because I want to
But I
improve.
think in freelance you have a lot of that, right? You have the gigs that you're like, oh, those are so good. I really love to do. They're really easy, and the ones that are like, oh my god, this is
I
gonna look
also-
so good in my portfolio.
Sometimes I'm in this weird position now where I realize I'm like, I need to stop treating every client commission like this. I need to stop making it harder than it needs to be. Because sometimes I'm like, I just need this, $1,000 or something and just be done with it.
Yeah.
I shouldn't have to keep doing this. So it's also knowing like, are you just tired? Allow yourself to be tired.
Yeah.
And also recognize when you're not being challenged. You have to assign yourself that challenge.
Mhm.
Okay, more questions. Keep them coming. Because I don't see them right now. I think it's not updating. Oh, yeah. Is there any of the questions you want to dip back into until more people send us questions?
We really got to the end of what I.
Oh,
had
there's a good
written.
one there. What is one of everyone's favorite modern day artists?
Oh, I guess it's not updating on mobile.
Yeah.
Okay, modern day artists. I love Victor Nagai.
Victor
Sachin
Nagai. Oh my
Teng.
god.
Sachin Teng, Sachin Teng.
Oh,
So
everyone
Sachin
loves
Teng's
him.
work was what I was looking at when I switched into illustration. Huge influence on me. There's a reason why I wanted to get into Society of Illustrators.
Okay, there's one point in common for me on
Mhm.
both his work and Victor Nagai's.
Mhm.
I can see the process behind it. I can see
Yes.
like how they like the processing of
You want to be confused by the work. You don't want to immediately know how you would do it yourself.
exactly.
Yes,
Exactly,
and that's the most.
exactly.
That's the reason why I started getting more into film and more into photography and stuff, because I didn't understand how it worked,
Uh-huh.
and part of me didn't want to understand. I want the magic to stay there, because now that we're artists, we look at art very differently, and it's almost less fun. It's stressful now.
It's stressful,
So
yeah.
always analyzing,
But the
always
way they
looking
do
for
it,
the
I
scenes.
think they still keep that magic because I
They
can't
keep the
figure it
magic,
out.
yeah,
Like
and it's always refreshing in new ways
Yeah,
while
yeah.
still being their style.
Yeah.
They're still being like very recognizably them. I can spot a
and
Victor
refreshing,
Nagai
like
piece.
over the top
Yeah.
refreshing. Like
Yeah.
it's they're like they're on another level.
Finding someone who keeps that magic alive in their work is
Yeah.
so special.
Elizabeth, what about you?
Modern day artists. I think the first one that came to mind is actually a comic book artist, Sean Gordon Murphy. I just fell in love with
Uh-huh.
the
What
way
do they
His
work
work
on?
is really good.
he's currently working on
Like Night.
White Knight?
the White Knight.
Yeah,
Yes.
pretty soon.
But I found him when he was doing Constantine, and actually some YouTube tutorials. Definitely look them
Really
up.
good inking.
Yeah,
That's
his
excellent
like
inking.
ink to white ratio on the page just like blew my mind.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, he's still one of my favorites till this day. You know, like still follow his work.
No, he's a favorite.
Can I do like a tiny list of my favorite graphic novel
Yeah.
artists? Like
I'm
it's
trying to
Jen
remember this
Wang,
person's name, so
Vera
I'm searching up the
Brosgol,
comic I
and the lady who does Woman World.
I know who you're talking about. Yeah,
Aminder?
I'm not sure, but I see the cover image in my head.
Yes.
I want to say also Matthias Vergara, who works on Coda by Boom Comics right now, has the most incredible style, and I am even more impressed by them even more. So I haven't said this before. So Boom reached out to me last year to do test pages for that comic,
Cool.
and I obviously didn't get the job.
But
Here's the thing. Here's the thing. After seeing the artist they picked, I was thrilled because I was like, oh, if I had done it, this book would have been way shittier. I get to enjoy it so thoroughly now to see the decisions he made and how refreshing it is and how exciting it is. So I'm like,
the layouts.
I
are
get to
insane.
enjoy it as a reader so fully that I'm just obsessed with his colors and his work. And now I get to learn from him. If
Awesome.
I had gotten the job, I wouldn't have gotten to learn from him.
I got the same sensation from the Moore's work because he does Power Rangers, and it's very teenage YA stuff, and it's exactly the stuff that I'm doing right now. And at some point, I did tests for Boom.
Excuse me.
Can't say
hello,
exactly for
everybody.
what, but,
I don't know if I was supposed to say it, but we're here now.
So it's the same. I feel the same way that you just said.
You're just so excited as just a reader.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. At this
As
point,
a
like
consumer, you know?
yeah,
Yeah.
at this point,
And you have to remember what it's like to be the reader too.
yeah.
We've got some pretty good questions
Okay, let's
actually
see.
on the so this one's for Isadora specifically, but Gabriel, I feel like you could tap in on this. How did you grow as an illustrator in Brazil? Was it social media or did you move into freelance work with the help of an agent?
Oh boy.
Yeah.
No, actually, I feel kind of
Okay, so
guilty
there
about
are
saying
two,
that,
there are
but
two questions there.
it's because social media was something that happened to me instead of something that I actively pursued. You know, the first 50,000.
Okay.
Yeah, the first 50,000 are so difficult, but because I don't know how to approach this. And after that, I'm not gonna say it's a swift breeze, but it gets easier. And
For me, it was an actual
social media.
approach. For me, it was an actual approach. I wanted, I knew that the local industry was weak, so I wanted to present my work to especially American industry, but also European one. So that's why I wanted to grow a following. Never expected to get that big, but that's why I wanted
But
to.
there's something
to grow
we
a
need
following.
to say. as two people who had the same agent. It's not the agent. The agent's not gonna get you.
Yeah.
any
No,
social media
The agent
followers.
amplifies your work.
Amplifies
They
my-
and
yeah.
they
They
ultimately,
allow you to work more hours.
yeah, because an agent's job, I think we need to clarify this, is that an agent's job ensures that the work that you're getting gets fairly compensated,
Yes.
and they take care of the busy work. They take care of making sure the
All the
contract says
business
the right
behind
thing.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, so you're still doing what you would have done anyways with probably the clients who saw you. They don't know your agent. There are some agents who do work like that, but especially for us with more visible platforms, they're just there to handle the busy work that you don't
Exactly.
wanna do.
You just put it perfectly.
Yes.
Another.
Also, just real quick, for anyone who's commenting, asking like the specific names and stuff, please tweet at us later. We'll make sure to
Oh,
come
yeah.
up with a list of the people that we
Oh, I
Yes.
just want to
Yeah.
say,
because
but
people
then
are
again,
asking.
I had social media, but if I didn't,
Mhm.
and if I had like the work I had today, if I went to clients, I'd still get work. Like it's not mandatory. Once again, it makes things easier a couple times with specific clients. Some clients don't
It's not
care.
gonna be a game changer, like
It's
for you. It's not gonna be. At least for me, it totally wasn't. For Isadora, it also wasn't.
I should also say that not all agents are like for everything. Like I specifically have a literary agent. He
Oh,
takes care of my book stuff, and that's it. That's where our relationship ends. I do, creative direction. I do client work. I do, I have a creative collective that I run. He doesn't touch any of that
No,
stuff.
our agent was like an agent, manager, personal assistant. So he's not our agent anymore. And now Piccolo got a new
Assistant.
person as an assistant and
Like
as
to help
manager.
with comment.
And now I'm looking
Okay.
for a
I need to get on that.
literary agent. So because everything is so different.
All right, and then I think we should cap it off soon because it's like 11:30. But there's one last question that I really thought was good. How do you decide which career opportunities to pursue and which to pass on? Because we did not talk about the power of saying no and the fact that you were allowed to say no.
You are
Well,
allowed to say no.
Can I say that Neil Gaiman taught me that? Because on that Make Good Art video, he says that you need to think of yourself like you are climbing a mountain. The mountain is like where you want to go. And you just need to look at the job opportunities and think if they take you closer to the mountain. And
Very
sometimes if
good
you're
way to
in
say that, yeah.
the middle of the way and you have opportunities that you look and you're like, well, if I was on the beginning of my climbing, that would have been a good opportunity. But now it's just going to take me back. And if you look at it that way, I know it's simplistic, but it helped me so much.
The best answers are the simple ones, the ones that you're like, duh, but then you actually have to realize it for yourself in your situation,
Right.
and put it in context for your situation.
Yeah. You
Yes,
have to
because
decide.
sometimes like, there's money.
Yeah.
And if there's money around, like, no.
And to be honest, like for example, in 2015 when I started to do freelancing, I really needed the money, so I was taking literally any commission that came out my way. But today, like 2019, my time is worth way more,
Yes.
and I'm
That's a big
busy
difference.
working in other stuff. So
Yeah.
I can still do I accept new projects? Yes, I do,
The
but they have to be
priorities,
they have to be
change.
they have to
And
be
they're
really
clear.
interesting.
Yeah.
They have to be really interesting.
It's
for
the
me to
same thing
accept
as like I don't say yes to personal commissions and also client commissions, I should say
Uh-huh.
too, unless I feel like is this something I'm proud to put my name on? Is this something that will teach me something new?
Will I have fun doing
Will I
it?
have fun
Yeah.
doing it? It comes back to the privilege of saying no.
Yeah,
Yes.
It's a
absolutely.
privilege of saying no.
Absolutely.
Sometimes we need the money. Other times we need the portfolio piece. Other times, like we're allowed to say no. And sometimes it's circumstantial. I'm not going to say don't ever say yes to a client unless you're fascinated by the work, because maybe you're not there yet.
Especially if you're just starting out. But you also have to think about like where do you want to go with your career? What are your priorities? Because you remember when we were talking about when did you start thinking of yourself as a professional? And I said, well, I was a lead graphic designer and I didn't think I was a pro. I thought of people who had books as pros, people who were published. And
Your definition of success.
And the thing is, was my priority is I wanted a book. And so I got a proposal for my fourth colorist gig. And as nice as that project would have been, I really wanted to take that time to work on my own book because that was my priority. Was I wanted to draw and write my own work instead of working on somebody else's. So even though the paycheck would have been nice and the story was definitely good, I said no, and I took that time for myself to make my own book, and I have that now, and I'm very happy that I made that decision for myself.
I have to also say, in terms of pricing yourself as an artist and commissions and what your time is quite literally worth in money, it's a weird discussion because like you have to decide also, how do I phrase this? You have to decide what's worth your energy and your time. It's like just because I can complete something in an hour, if it takes me a whole 2 weeks of emailing this client, I'm gonna charge them more for it. If I know that they have the means to charge me more, and if I know they're lowballing me, I have to have a community with me who I can check in and be like, hey, did they give you the same rate for this?
Yes.
That's why you need a community. You need friends. You need you need to put yourself out there as a creator, because that's ultimately the safety net. Those people are looking for you. And so when they notice you're working with an editor or something that they had a bad experience with, they'll come like knocking on your door and being like, hey, just be careful. They have each other's back. And unfortunately, like I had to learn that the hard way over the summer for a separate story. But like if I
Another can of worms.
yeah, another day. But like if it wasn't for friends who had my back and had my best interests reach out and be like, you need to be aware of your situation and open my eyes to that, I would be in a very different spot right now.
Yeah. Liz, I know that you've had some experience with like having to judge what jobs to say no to, because you said no to me before.
Yeah. So, well, I
Which was completely legit. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm glad that you did.
So I mean, I'm still stuck in my full-time job. One day I'll go part-time, getting there. But you offered me another fighting job, and I'm like, man, that was rough with our first gig. And I'm like, I don't want to deal with those deadlines again, feeling like I was being on call. And on the side, while I was doing the fighting thing, I was working on my webcomic. So, and then I'm like, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to post it online and make it. And so, yeah, I had to say no to that. And then some other people, if you haven't experienced it, I'm sure you all have, are like, I have this huge epic project that I want you to take on, but I can't pay you right now. I'm like, no. It sounds interesting, but you can't pay me right now. I have a full-time job for that.
Yeah. So that's the thing. That's where you are on the mountain. For someone who has like a lot of free time and a lot of faith in their projects, apparently, maybe they can do it.
Yeah.
I don't know if
time
we
is
are.
money. It's like you can.
Time is money.
Yeah.
And also, like, it's so interesting that it was like another kind of gig that you prioritized your personal work, like something you created.
I wasn't.
That is also so hard to pick,
Yeah.
like the right time to do something for yourself.
It was so
I
hard
really
for
need
me
to do
too,
that.
because I work as a dog walker, and I'm not exactly making bank doing that. But it was more important that I have my own book. I was just so impatient that I was like, you know what, I'll take the cut. I'll do without that paycheck. I'll find a way. This is what I'm passionate about. But that some people don't have that luxury. I know a couple of years ago I didn't have that luxury.
I should say, just to be as transparent as possible, it's like I am able to achieve where I'm at right now simply for the fact that like I don't have serious living expenses.
Yes.
My office space is based out of the home that I live with my family and my parents and stuff. And maybe that'll change in the future. But as it is right now, I have substantial savings from my client work and from my freelance work. And so my trajectory, my climbing the mountain is at a different speed than other people. And ultimately, it's like, that's why it can't be a race. Your definition of success has to be different. It can't be, I want to be Forbes 30 under 30, because that's an arbitrary, it's a fake expectation. It means very little. It can't be, I need to be published by 25, because you don't really need anything except for eating, breathing, and sleeping in a nice warm bed. So it's like, if you made that, gonna be okay.
They're gonna
Yeah,
be okay.
yeah. It'll be all right.
Yeah,
That's time.
it's all a matter of like accessibility. Like Liz and I, we're the same age, right? And
27.
right,
About
we
a year apart.
about a year apart, but we graduated around the same time,
Yeah,
like the same
just
year.
within like 6 months.
But you have a 4-year degree, and I have a 2-year degree. But that 2-year degree took me 5 years to get because I had to work that entire
Yeah.
time. I couldn't go full hog on it, and so.
And you were still in the position to lift up 2 artists with you.
Yeah.
You still mentored me. You still gave me my first artist alley experience. Like, I will never forget that or discount that experience. Like, you may not have seen yourself as a professional. But to me, yeah, hell yeah. And it's like, what are you doing with your platform? Who are you lifting up with you?
Yes.
What door are you open up to other
If you
artists?
do have
Support your
followers, what
friends.
are you using them for?
Yeah. Throw that whole Spider-Man quote.
Yeah, so like, why don't we end the panel with that? Because, like I said, it's already fairly late, and we've been going for like an hour and a half now.
Right. We got one last solid
Time
question.
goes so fast when you're having
Because
fun.
we have 2 colorists here, and I feel like we're obligated. We have 2
Okay,
colorists
okay,
and 2
alright.
people who struggle with color. So,
Okay. All right. So one
So-
last question.
The one last question was like someone asked, how do you improve your coloring skills? I have an issue with picking out colors. Don't have a keen eye with them as many others do.
Oh, man.
So, do our colorists want to weigh in on that?
All right. I would say a really good thing to do that helped me. So when I was in college, I took a sociology class because you kind of, it was one of those like gen ed credits that you needed. And sociology is the study of groups of people and like the study of like how do cultural values operate and the way that people think. And that actually helped me a lot when it came to my art overall, but also with my coloring, because what people forget a lot of the time is color is a language. Each color conveys, an emotion. It draws something out of you. So red is anger and passion, but blue is soothing, but also sadness. And there is a reason that we make night scenes blue and purple, and we make sunset scenes red and orange. And what does that do for you? And what is that doing for the scene narratively? And so if you examine that, if you look into the language of color, because there's a lot of psychological studies done on this stuff, that will help you understand how to achieve the vibe you're going for in any given scene in a comic or an illustration.
It's great advice.
I was going to say that's way better than what I was going to say, which is go on Pinterest, find a bunch of nice, use the ink drop tool, steal that shit. But sure, sociology, psychology, yeah, excellent stuff. I like yellow. It ends there.
I have a favorite palette.
But also steal that shit.
Yeah, but really, like, think about what you're trying to achieve, and then once you know, like, I really want to do something solemn and mournful for this scene or this illustration, you're gonna start thinking about, like, okay, I guess I need to start going towards like cooler palettes. So like very like whites and light blues and just that sort of thing. And then I find for me personally, once I have that little tidbit of direction, I can just run with that. Like once I point me in a direction, and I know how to solve a problem when you give me a box to work in.
Color as narrative,
Yes.
essentially.
Yes.
Well, I think no, I'm sorry.
My approach is slightly different. I really like the technical side of learning color because then I understand it. It's solid. It's there. So I got really into color theory, like which colors work with each other. There's more than just complementary. There's like triadic and then like analogous monochrome. Yeah, even like spot color from like an analogous side. There's a whole bunch of different things. But I think I learn best when I used actual paint, like how the colors mix together, and it's like which ones like made gray or blue, or how to turn it a little more blue. And because it's different translating out on the computer, but if you just slide that hue saturation bar, it's like, oh, it's like adding a little blue to the paint. So like seeing it, how it worked physically for me, helped me like convert it to digital as well.
That's the fine arts side, that fine arts education kicking in.
Yes, and
I'm so bad
also
at that shit.
and also recognizing that light is color. Like if you shine a white light on something, it's going to be like the local color of it. But if you have like the moonlight, like you mentioned, it's going to be blue. But someone's skin tone is not going to be like that pink color. It's going to have a more purpley shade.
Right, and that's one of the most difficult things about coloring that is, for people who are great at inking, really hard to understand is like, yes, that's their skin, but it's nighttime, so it's not actually going to look like skin. It needs to be blue, but how do I make it blue but also skin? It's a lot of creative problem solving, and I mean, that part I really don't know how to
I mean
explain. It's just a certain amount of intuition at that point.
I mean, it comes with practice. I mean, I think if anyone knows Matt Wilson's name, he is phenomenal at it.
I think he's at FCTV too. I feel
He is, I think.
he is? Okay, I need to give him a hug. I need to say thank you for teaching me all I know.
As people who hate color, what do you guys have any, like, how do you compensate?
I was saying, like,
for your lack of color sense.
I go for my own taste all the time. Like, does this look good? It does. Oh, okay, so it must probably be right.
Yeah.
And
do you do that thing also where it's like, I'm gonna do a different color palette this time, and then you eventually every time. So I'm looking at
how
my
do you
table
delete
today.
someone else's tweet?
Oh, we're in person, you loser.
I'm sorry.
So when I was looking at my Comic-Con table today, it was the first time seeing like all of my art in front of me. I was like, oh, I've used a lot of orange and green and yellow.
You see my table, like everything's kind of like purple, pinkish.
But you'll keep doing color adjustments until it's right back where you started. This was useless.
But I saw a tweet that was like, if you can make something look good in colors, stop saying you don't know how to color stuff, because you clearly do. Like you have good sense, you have good eye.
For the longest time though, it's like I recognized my difficulty with color for a long time. It's something I worked on very, very hard, but then I realized that it's like now people are asking me how to work with color, and I'm like, I don't fucking know. But they think I do, and it's that perception of like I don't see myself good at color because I haven't been good at color for so long, and I still struggle with it. But just because you struggle with something doesn't mean you're bad at it.
That's also the difference between like someone who knows how to do it and then like a specialist, because this question arose, and like you'll notice I'm a colorist. That is the thing I am good at, and therefore I arguably gave the most nuanced response.
Yes, that's why she knows her shit.
Not trying to do my own,
but you clearly gave like a super articulate, incredible answer, and you're like, steal that shit.
but like that's the difference. It's like it's. Just because you couldn't give that response doesn't mean you weren't good at color. It doesn't mean that you don't have that
that level of understanding. It's like just because I do it, I don't know how. And I think you have that self-awareness that we're still working towards.
Right. Yeah.
And very often people just don't take that answer because I think Picolo actually like last year, like he was like, "You're really good at colors," and you asked me something, I was like, bitch, I'm not. I'm really not.
And that's why I guess you have the confidence to call yourself a colorist, and we will never be able to do so.
But you guys are way better at inking than I am. You have a lot of understanding about mark making and line weight that I'm just now learning how to do, and like why certain things work. So it's like, well, you might be able to look at my art and go, yeah, that's some pretty solid line art. I maybe don't necessarily understand what made it the best line art.
That's
fascinating. Something that made me learn a lot when I started doing flats. When I stopped doing lines so much, I had to become much better at coloring than I was because I didn't have lines. I couldn't rely on them to separate
That's
what I was
good,
doing.
yeah.
So I learned a lot about values. I learned a lot about saturation. I learned a lot about which colors worked so I could have a palette and use it on all my artwork.
The ultimate question, a lot of us, especially working in sequential comics, is it's not comics, they're sequential. Anyways, working in that world is trying to marry having inks and having color and not spending so much time on either, because time is everything when you're working and publishing, and you don't have time to do your best painting every time. And finding that shorthand is where you make or break your work. And so for me, it's like deleting lines and removing lines and adding color instead to describe the same thing. And for me, as someone who comes from like a more line art based type of thinking, it's realizing that I can describe shapes and I can describe textures and all that with colors too.
Yeah.
It's not me filling in the line.
Mhm.
It's I'm using a tool to describe something the
Yeah,
same way I
because
would
when
with-
you come like to a high saturation exchange, the line's there. Your eyes.
Yeah,
See it.
exactly. That's another big thing that
But,
people, inkers specifically, don't understand is how to delineate spatial awareness.
Yes, that was the thing that
Values,
got me so
color,
much.
using saturation to help the eye figure out what is closer to you and what is farther away. And that's a really, really important skill to have because it creates depth in the composition, and ultimately that's what all artists are trying to achieve, is to make a two-dimensional thing a three-dimensional
Yes.
space.
I think
This was the worst last question.
Because color theory is like a scientific
something-
theory.
But you know something that helped me a lot. I'm not gonna remember the name of the director right now, but comics. I'm trying to start doing comics, and to learn, I've been watching a lot of movies to try to learn from movies. And if you put down a best color direction or best movie color, best art direction in movie, like you see, like just see the movies. Like the narrative is the most important part, and how they use colors to tell it. I think it's the seventh. I don't remember the name of. It's a director that works with colors like amazingly. My friend showed me the other day. But if you go to Moonrise Kingdom, what's his name?
Yes. Wes Anderson.
Wes Anderson.
Mhm.
Wes Anderson movies have very diverse color palettes, and they all work so well. And you can learn from a screenshot, but you can learn just as well from like watching how the movie progresses and why the colors change.
But again, that's the color as
That's the
narrative.
sequential.
Yes.
Yes.
You have to
What's
think
telling
of
the
it as
story
about it.
equally, if not sometimes even more important to what you're doing. So it's like breaking out of the idea it's like lines are the most important thing and color comes second. No, you're going to see the entire image together, so they all deserve your time and energy.
Yes,
Absolutely. I was going to say that color is important, but you also need to check your values because the point of highest contrast on the page is going to be your focal point.
Yes.
Yeah.
That
You can
changed my life.
screw yourself over if you make the brightest part of the page something that isn't the important part of the page.
It's part of the story.
You need to know what you did.
That's where a lot of inkers have trouble with color. Also, is not understanding value because they're so used to working in just that pure
Black, white.
black and
white, yeah.
white.
Just automatically
So
contrast.
I oftentimes see them very afraid of establishing contrast. So all of the colors are sort of like if you transform them into grayscale, which is a great thing to do, is to, if you're not sure about your colors and your contrasts, take your piece and put it in grayscale. And if you can't delineate one color from another in grayscale, you're doing it wrong. There is no contrast.
There's no
Even if
focal
the colors
point,
are different, the values are the same, and that doesn't help bring the eye anywhere. But yeah, that's what inkers are afraid of.
Yeah, drag us.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Do
sorry.
it.
I'm
Do
sorry. I have a lot of feelings.
Please follow along for Mara's follow-up panel. Fuck you. Learn to
Inkers,
color.
we need to talk.
It depends on your inking style too.
But yes, also, so yeah, it's pretty late. I think we've gone over 11:30 at this point. So I think this is a really good time to cut things off. Does everybody just like want to give our names and where you can find us, either on social media or like at C2E2?
Where the hell are we at C2E2? I'm so tired.
Okay, so Liz,
I'll
you start.
start. You can find me at Liz Creates with a KR. And you can find me at S6 at CT2.
You can find me at the Foofinator on Twitter and Sara-Alpha.com. And if you're at C2E2 this weekend, I'm at S5. I think.
Yes.
Find me in that area.
Yeah.
One of them is me.
You can find me as Mara Jayne CJAYNE on Twitter, Mara Jayne on Instagram, and at C2E2 I am Table S6. I'm sharing it with Liz.
She's right next to me, so if you find her, you found me.
You can find me on social media as Gabriel Picolo or Picolo.
Oh, we know.
These followers of yours, let's
No, we're gonna keep going.
And on C282, I'm on table
J10.
J10. I'm on table J10. I just learned.
Well,
Okay.
I'm on J9, right next to him. And I don't know, my name's kind of, well, I'm Zeferino, but it's so hard in another language, just like, honestly, just find me on
One of us
J9.
will tweet us out.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're around.
Once you find everyone else, you go to their Twitters and then you find me.
There you go. All right, so we're gonna cut it off here.
Good night,
Thank you
everybody.
Good
so much, everybody, for joining us. This was amazing, and
Now,
hopefully,
bye.
yeah. See you later.
Go to bed.